My name is Tiffany, I'm 27 years old, and if you had told me 3 years ago that I'd be sitting in a director's chair at one of the most respected marketing firms in New York, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, I was broken. I had just graduated college, full of hope, full of ideas, and thinking I was about to step into the kind of life I had dreamed about since I was a little girl. But the truth is, I didn't even have a place to sleep that night. My own mother, the woman who was supposed to be my biggest supporter, looked me straight in the eye and told me I would never amount to anything. Then she kicked me out of the house. No warning, no safety net. She said I was a waste of space and that she was done carrying me. I remember standing on the porch with 2 suitcases, my diploma sticking out of my backpack, and my mom's face cold and hard as she closed the door. That night, I slept in my car. I was terrified, humiliated, and so angry I couldn't breathe. I kept asking myself how a mother could say those things to her own daughter. But more than anything, I kept replaying her words, never amount to anything. They burned into me like fire. That's the thing about me, when someone tells me I can't do something, I will break myself trying to prove them wrong. And that night, as I stared at the ceiling of my beat-up Honda Civic, I swore that one day I'd make something of myself. Not just for me, but so that when she looked at me again, she'd choke on her own words. I didn't know how or when. But I knew one thing, I wasn't going to let her be right. The morning after my mom kicked me out, I sat in the driver's seat of my Civic with swollen eyes and a notebook on my lap. I had maybe $200 in my bank account, no job lined up, and no family to turn to. My dad had left when I was 12, and my mom made sure to cut ties with anyone else who might have helped me. For a few minutes, I just sat there frozen. But then I started making a plan. Step 1, survival. I found a cheap coffee shop that offered free Wi-Fi and started applying to every entry-level job I could find. Retail, fast food, office assistant, anything. Within a week, I landed a part-time cashier position at a grocery store in Brooklyn. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me a paycheck and somewhere warm to stand. Step 2, shelter. I couldn't live in my car forever. I found a Craigslist ad for a tiny basement room, barely big enough to fit a mattress and a desk, but it was cheap and mine. I moved in with my 2 duffel bags and that stupid diploma I couldn't stop staring at. Step 3, the dream. I didn't just want to survive. I wanted to climb. Marketing had always been my passion. I had spent 4 years studying campaigns, branding, consumer behavior, and I wasn't about to throw it all away. Every night after my grocery shifts, I'd sit at that wobbly desk and teach myself more, online courses, YouTube tutorials, even reading case studies for fun. I started building a portfolio, making mock campaigns for fake companies just to practice. I'll never forget the first interview I landed at a small startup. I showed them my fake projects, and instead of laughing, the manager leaned back and said, "You've got something here." They offered me a marketing assistant position on the spot. It didn't pay much more than the grocery store, but it was a foot in the door. And for me, that was enough. Because I knew I wasn't just working for myself anymore, I was building the revenge that would one day silence my mom forever. Working at that startup was like being thrown into the deep end of a pool without knowing how to swim. The company had maybe 12 employees, and everyone wore 10 different hats. My official title was marketing assistant, but in reality, I was doing everything, writing social media posts, cold emailing potential clients, analyzing data I barely understood, even running out for coffee when someone forgot to order it. It was exhausting. I'd get home after 10, collapse on my mattress, and stare at the ceiling wondering if I'd made a mistake. But then I'd remember my mom's voice, "You'll never amount to anything." And suddenly, I'd sit up, open my laptop, and force myself to learn one more skill before bed. Photoshop. SEO. Paid ads. Anything that made me harder to replace. Within 6 months, my boss noticed. His name was Andrew, a scrappy 30-something entrepreneur who treated the office like his second home. One day, he called me into his glass-walled office and said, "Tiffany, you've been punching above your weight." I want you to take lead on our next campaign." My stomach dropped. I wasn't ready, or at least I didn't think I was, but I said yes. That campaign was for a small eco-friendly clothing brand. I poured every ounce of myself into it. I designed visuals, crafted messaging, and even convinced a local influencer to wear their clothes for free in exchange for exposure. The campaign exploded. Sales tripled. The client sent flowers to the office with a handwritten thank you card addressed to me. From that moment, I wasn't just the girl who ran errands, I was someone the company relied on. Within a year, Andrew promoted me to marketing manager. The funny part? I started earning more in that role than my mom had made in 20 years at her office job. And for the first time, I felt the revenge taking shape. By the time I was 25, I had become the go-to person at the startup. Any time a client came in, Andrew would introduce me as the brains behind the magic, which both terrified and thrilled me. My confidence grew with every successful campaign, but I also started noticing something: word travels fast in this industry. One evening, I got a LinkedIn message from a recruiter at a mid-sized marketing firm in Manhattan. They'd seen the eco-friendly clothing campaign and wanted to talk. My first instinct was loyalty to Andrew and the startup that had taken a chance on me, but then I remembered my tiny basement room, my mom's sneer, and the vow I had made to myself in that Civic. I agreed to the interview. Walking into that firm's sleek office was like stepping into another world. Glass walls, polished wood floors, people in tailored suits tapping away on laptops. I felt underdressed in my thrift store blazer, but I held my head high. During the interview, I spoke passionately about my projects, my late-night studying, and the strategies I'd tested. When the hiring manager asked where I saw myself in 5 years, I said, without hesitation, running a department. They hired me. The transition was brutal. Unlike the startup, where creativity flowed freely, this firm was structured and cutthroat. Deadlines were sharp, competition was fierce, and everyone seemed older and more experienced. For the first few months, I felt like the new kid in high school again. But once I landed my first big client, an up-and-coming beverage company, and delivered a campaign that boosted their sales by 40%, I started to earn respect. The real turning point came when one of my campaigns caught the attention of a national chain. They requested me by name for their rebranding. Suddenly, people weren't just noticing my work, they were noticing me. And with every new step forward, I kept thinking, the higher I climb, the harder she'll fall when she sees me again. By 26, I wasn't just another employee, I was a rising name in the marketing world. My campaigns were featured in industry blogs, my strategies were being quietly copied by competitors, and clients began specifically requesting to work with me. For the first time, I had leverage. I used it. When annual reviews came around, I walked into my manager's office with a portfolio of my results and a list of what I had delivered for the firm. I didn't fumble or apologize like I used to. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I believe I've earned a promotion, and a raise that reflects the value I bring." He leaned back, studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Within a week, my title changed to Senior Marketing Manager, and my salary jumped enough that I finally upgraded from my dingy basement room to a small one-bedroom apartment with actual sunlight. But success didn't make me soft. I worked harder than ever, and I started building something beyond a resume: influence. I nurtured relationships with clients, attended networking events, and even mentored new hires. My name began to carry weight. And then, the opportunity that would change everything landed in my inbox. A major global corporation, a household name, was opening a new marketing division in New York. They were recruiting aggressively, and one of their executives had seen my work. They wanted me to interview for a director role. I almost laughed when I read it. Me? A director? At 27? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I had the results, the reputation, and the fire. And deep down, I wanted it, not just for the title or the salary, but for the day my mom would see me sitting in a chair she swore I'd never reach. So, I applied. And I promised myself, if I got this job, The revenge I had dreamed about since that night in my Civic would finally be within reach. The interview for the director position felt like the most important day of my life. I remember standing in front of my mirror the night before, smoothing down the sleeves of my tailored blazer, my first real investment piece, not something pulled from a thrift store. My hands were shaking, not because I didn't think I could do the job, but because I knew how much was riding on it. The next morning, I arrived early at the skyscraper where the corporation's New York office was located. The lobby alone felt intimidating: marble floors, enormous chandeliers, security guards in suits. As the elevator climbed, I whispered to myself, "You've worked for this. You belong here." The panel interview was brutal. 5 executives sat across from me, firing off question after question. How do you handle underperforming staff? What's your process for scaling campaigns globally? What's the biggest mistake you've ever made, and how did you recover? I answered honestly, leaning on real experiences. I admitted that at my startup job, I once miscalculated ad spend and nearly tanked a client's budget. But instead of hiding it, I explained how I owned up to it, fixed the problem, and implemented a new system that reduced errors across the team. To my surprise, a few of the executives actually smiled. By the end of the interview, I was mentally drained but strangely calm. I knew I hadn't been perfect, but I had been real. A week later, my phone rang. It was the executive recruiter. My heart was pounding so hard I almost didn't hear him say the words. "Tiffany, we'd like to offer you the director of marketing position." I nearly dropped the phone. I accepted on the spot. That night, sitting in my new apartment, I poured myself a glass of cheap wine and stared out the window at the city lights. I had done it. I was 27 years old and about to run an entire department. And I had no idea that soon, fate was going to bring my mom back into my life, in a way I never expected. My first day as director of marketing was surreal. Walking into that sleek, high-rise office, I felt both powerful and terrified. A team of 15 people reported directly to me, most of them older and more experienced. Some gave me side eyes, clearly wondering how someone my age had landed the job. I couldn't blame them. Sometimes I wondered the same thing. But I refused to let doubt show. I gathered the team in the conference room and introduced myself. "I know some of you are probably questioning why I'm here," I said, looking around the table. "But I didn't get this position because of luck. I got it because I know how to deliver results. And I promise you this, if we work together, we're going to make this division the most talked about in the company." The room was silent for a moment, then someone clapped, and the rest followed. From that day forward, I poured myself into the role. I was the first one in, the last one out. I built relationships, listened to my team, and made sure credit was given where it was due. Within months, our campaigns were outperforming projections, and my name was being whispered in executive halls. But success has a funny way of drawing out the ghosts you think you've buried. One afternoon, HR sent me a list of scheduled interviews for an open position in my department. I skimmed through the names, not thinking much of it, until my eyes froze on one in particular. Margaret, Marketing Associate Candidate. Margaret. My mother's name. At first, I laughed out loud. It had to be someone else. There was no way. But as I stared at the screen, my chest tightened. The resume attached confirmed it. It was her. The same woman who kicked me out, who said I'd never amount to anything, who left me crying in a car 3 years ago, was now applying for a job in my department. And in just a few days, she'd be walking into an interview where I would be sitting in the director's chair. The morning of the interview, I could barely concentrate. My team thought I was just running on too much caffeine, but inside I was spiraling. I kept picturing her face when she walked into that room and saw me, not the broke, desperate girl she kicked out, but the woman in charge. When the time finally came, I sat at the long glass table in the interview room, resume folder in front of me. I forced myself to sit tall, calm, collected. My palms, though, were slick with sweat. The door opened. And there she was. My mom froze the second her eyes landed on me. She looked older than I remembered, more tired, lines etched deeper around her mouth. Her confident stride faltered, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Her face went pale, almost chalk white, like all the blood had drained out. I didn't flinch. "Hello, Margaret," I said evenly, as though she were any other candidate. "Please, have a seat." Her mouth opened, then closed. She lowered herself into the chair slowly, clutching her bag like it was armor. For a long moment, she just stared at me, trying to find words. I let the silence stretch. Then, flipping through her resume, I asked in the same professional tone I used with anyone else, "Can you walk me through your experience and what makes you a good fit for this role?" Her voice cracked. Tiffany, I didn't know." I cut her off. "This interview is about your qualifications. If you'd like to proceed, please answer the question." Her hands trembled. She stumbled through her work history, clerical jobs, office assistant roles, nothing particularly impressive. Every word sounded weaker than the last. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife deeper, my boss, one of the executives, walked into the room mid-interview. He smiled at me and said, "Tiffany, how's the candidate? Do you think she has potential?" The room went dead silent. And I could feel my mom's shame filling every corner of it. I didn't answer right away. I could feel my mother's eyes on me, pleading, desperate, but I kept my gaze steady on my boss. The room was thick with tension, like the air itself was holding its breath. Finally, I spoke. "From what I've seen so far," I said carefully, "her experience doesn't really align with the level of work we do here." My mom flinched, like I'd just slapped her. She tried to recover, her voice shaky. I can learn. I'm a hard worker. I need this opportunity." I didn't soften. Not yet. Not after everything. My boss gave me a knowing look. "Fair enough. I'll let you handle it," he said, and stepped back out, leaving us alone again. The second the door closed, my mom broke. "Tiffany, please. I didn't know you were here." I wouldn't have. She stopped herself, tears forming in her eyes. "I made mistakes, okay? But you have to understand. I thought I was pushing you to be stronger." I almost laughed. Stronger? She had kicked me out with nothing but a diploma and a car that barely ran. I remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep in that basement room, the way I worked double shifts just to afford instant noodles. "You didn't push me to be stronger," I said coldly. "You abandoned me. And you know what? It worked. I became stronger in spite of you, not because of you." Her face crumpled, and for the first time in my life, I saw her look small. Vulnerable. She whispered, "I'm sorry." The words I had wanted to hear for years, but they didn't land the way I thought they would. Instead of satisfaction, I felt a sharp ache in my chest. I sat back in my chair, arms crossed. "This interview is over." Her lip trembled. She stood slowly, clutching her bag, and walked out without another word. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I realized something. I had won. But it didn't feel like victory, at least not yet. After my mom walked out of that interview room, I just sat there, staring at the empty chair she had left behind. For 3 years, I had dreamed of this moment, the day I would finally prove her wrong, the day she'd see me as someone powerful, untouchable. And yes, I had gotten what I wanted. She had looked me in the eye and crumbled. She had begged, even apologized. But instead of pure satisfaction, what I felt was hollow. That night, I went home and poured myself a glass of wine, but it didn't taste like victory. I sat on my couch, replaying every second of that interview. Her pale face. Her trembling voice. The way she whispered, "I'm sorry." I thought back to that night in my car, when she shut the door in my face and told me I'd never amount to anything. That moment had fueled everything, the long nights, the studying, the relentless climb. My rage had been my engine. But now that the confrontation had come and gone, I realized something terrifying. if my revenge had been my driving force, what was left now? I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I still wanted her approval. Not as a candidate in my office, not as a stranger across a desk, but as my mom. The next day at work, my boss stopped by my office. "So," he said casually, "about that candidate. You were right. She's not a fit." "Good call." I nodded, but I didn't say anything. Because the truth was, I wasn't thinking about my career in that moment. I was thinking about whether I wanted to leave things as they were, with me victorious, and her defeated, or if I wanted something else entirely. Revenge had carried me this far. But maybe closure required something more. The following weekend, I found myself pacing around my apartment with my phone in my hand. I had her number, of course I did. I'd saved it in my contacts even though I hadn't used it in years. Every time I scrolled past it, I'd feel that mix of anger and longing, but I never pressed call. Now, though, after seeing her so broken in that interview, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I wanted to say more. Maybe scream at her. Maybe demand answers. Maybe hear her out. Finally, I took a deep breath and dialed. It rang 3 times before she picked up. Her voice was quiet, almost cautious. "Hello? Mom. It's me." There was a long silence on the other end. Then I heard her sniffle. "Tiffany. I didn't think you'd ever call me again." "I wasn't going to," I admitted. "But after seeing you the other day, I realized we can't just leave things the way they are." She started crying softly. "I know I hurt you. I thought I was teaching you to be independent. I thought tough love would make you stronger. But I see now it was cruelty. I was wrong." Hearing her admit it made something inside me loosen. But I wasn't ready to forgive her, not yet. "You didn't just hurt me. You abandoned me when I needed you most. Do you have any idea what those years were like for me?" She was quiet, then whispered, "No. But I can imagine. And it kills me to know I caused that." For the first time in years, I heard sincerity in her voice. Not excuses. Not defensiveness. Just raw regret. I didn't forgive her that night. But I didn't hang up either. We stayed on the phone for nearly an hour, talking about everything, my childhood, her struggles, even her regrets about choices she made long before she kicked me out. And when I finally hung up, I realized something important. Maybe revenge wasn't about watching her suffer. Maybe real revenge was living a life so full, so successful, that her words could never touch me again. The week after our phone call, I couldn't stop replaying her words in my head. My mom had sounded small, broken, nothing like the woman who once stood on the porch and told me I'd never amount to anything. For years, I'd pictured her as this cold, immovable force. But now, all I could see was a flawed human who had made choices she couldn't undo. Part of me wanted to slam the door forever. After all, I had built my life without her. Every success, every late night, every promotion, I had done it alone. Why let her back in now, when she hadn't been there for the climb? But another part of me, the part that had gone to sleep crying more times than I could count, still wanted something from her. Not validation. Not approval. Just acknowledgement. A mother who finally saw me for who I was. One evening, after a long day at work, I grabbed my phone and texted her. "We should meet. Neutral place. Coffee shop on 5th, Saturday at 2. She responded within minutes, "I'll be there." That Saturday, I walked into the cafe early, my stomach in knots. When she arrived, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older than her years, shoulders slumped like she was carrying the weight of a lifetime of bad decisions. She smiled nervously when she saw me, but I didn't smile back. Not yet. We sat down. At first, it was awkward. She fidgeted with her cup, while I stirred my coffee just to have something to do with my hands. Then she finally spoke. "I was a terrible mother, Tiffany. I know it. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know, I am proud of you. Even if I don't deserve to be. The words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I had wanted to hear those 3 words, I'm proud of you. But hearing them now, after everything, felt bittersweet. I leaned back and said, you're right. You don't deserve to be. But I'll take the truth over silence. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. That meeting at the cafe lingered with me for days. I kept asking myself, what does winning really mean? Was it enough that my mom finally admitted she was wrong? That she told me she was proud, even if too late? For years, revenge had been the fire under my feet. I wanted her to choke on her words, to see me thriving while she struggled. And in that interview room, I had gotten exactly that. She had been small, pale, and powerless while I sat in the chair she once told me I'd never reach. But sitting across from her at that cafe, I realized something. Revenge hadn't brought me peace. Success had. Building a life on my own terms had. Being respected, valued, and in control, that was the real win. Still, I wasn't ready to fold her back into my life. I made that clear. You don't get to show up now and pretend we're fine, I told her. You left me when I had nothing. You don't get to erase that. She nodded, eyes glassy. I know. I'm not asking for a second chance as your mother. I want you to know I see you now. And I regret everything. It was strange, hearing her admit it didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like closure. In the weeks that followed, I kept my distance. I focused on my team, on the new projects I was leading, on building a reputation that stretched beyond New York. I was invited to speak at a marketing conference, and for the first time in my life, I stood on a stage in front of hundreds of people, sharing the strategies I had once taught myself alone in a basement. Afterward, I looked out at the applauding crowd and thought, this is it. This is my revenge. Living a life she never believed I could. And for the first time, the anger in my chest started to ease. A few weeks after the conference, I got another text from my mom. I know I don't deserve it, but can we meet again? Just once more. I stared at the screen for a long time. My first instinct was to ignore it. Part of me still wanted to punish her by shutting her out forever. But another part, maybe the stronger part, knew that avoiding her meant I was still letting her control me. So, I agreed. We met at the same cafe as before. She looked even more fragile this time, her hands trembling as she lifted her cup. She tried to make small talk, but I cut her off. Mom, let's be honest. Why do you want to see me? Her eyes filled with tears. Because I don't want to die with you hating me. That sentence hit harder than I expected. For a second, the wall I had built cracked. I remembered birthdays where she baked me cakes, nights when she used to braid my hair, mornings when she'd drive me to school singing along with the radio. She hadn't always been cruel. But somewhere along the way, bitterness had hardened her, and I had paid the price. I don't hate you, I said finally. But I'll never forget what you did. You left me when I needed you most. You don't get to erase that. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. And I'll carry that regret for the rest of my life. We sat in silence after that. For once, there was no screaming, no accusations. Just truth. When I left the cafe that day, I knew I had made my choice. I wasn't going to let her back into my daily life. I couldn't. But I wasn't going to let her ghost haunt me anymore either. My revenge was complete, not because I had destroyed her, but because I had risen above her. And for the first time, I felt free. The day I truly realized I was free came months later. I was standing in my office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, as my team gathered around a long conference table. We had just landed one of the biggest clients in the company's history, and the energy in the room was electric. My boss walked in, clapped me on the shoulder, and said, "This is your win, Tiffany. You've built something incredible here." Everyone turned and applauded. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to prove myself to anyone, not to my team, not to my boss, and definitely not to my mom. That night, I went home to my apartment, bigger now, filled with light, with a view I never thought I'd afford when I was eating instant noodles in that basement room. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker below. For years, I had lived for revenge. I wanted to see her broken, to make her regret every cruel word. And yes, I got that moment, the look on her face when she walked into that interview and saw me sitting in the director's chair. It was everything I thought I wanted. But the real revenge wasn't her shame. It was my life. The career I built from nothing, the respect I had earned, the freedom I carved out of the ashes of her rejection. I didn't reconcile with my mom in the way some stories end. We met a few more times, exchanged awkward conversations, but she never became part of my life again. And I was okay with that. Because forgiveness, I realized, didn't mean forgetting. It just meant letting go of the weight she had put on me. At 27 years old, I was living proof that her words had been wrong. I had amounted to something more than she could have ever imagined. And that, in the end, was the sweetest revenge of all.